Welcome to the Workology podcast, where we discuss the science and art of the workplace, gain powerful insights, resources, and perspectives on the industries of human resources and recruiting. Join your host, Jessica Miller-Merrill, chief blogger of bloggingforjobs.com, for a 45-minute in-depth and no-holds-barred look into the future of our most powerful business asset, the employee. And now, here's your host, Jessica, with this episode of Workology.
Welcome to the Workology podcast. It's great to have you on our new podcast as part of the Blogging for Jobs and the Recruiters Lounge blog family. I have with me Perri Gorman. Perri is a great friend, also is somebody that I have gotten to know through Twitter many, many years ago. And she has a really great product that we're going to talk about today for recruiters in the HR technology space. Perri, welcome to the Workology podcast.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Perri?
Well, I'm not sure we have enough time on this podcast. No, I really simply, I'm the CEO and founder of Archively. I live in San Francisco. I also founded a company called Enroll Me, which is an email and subscribe engine. I spent the majority of my professional career doing retained executive search in New York and Hong Kong in financial services, so like sales and trading, capital markets kind of work. That's me. That's in a snapshot.
Great. Well, and Perri is somebody that I don't know, how long have we known each other? Probably about
2009.
We first met on Twitter, and
when I was in Hong Kong, we met on Twitter.
Were you in Hong Kong? I thought you were in New York by then.
Well, I think we met when I was in Hong Kong, and then we did the original Skype on job interviewing in 2010.
Some folks might not know, and I always forget about like sharing this, but for 3 seasons, I had a job search internet television show called Job Search Secrets, which was a lot of fun, and basically we held court every Sunday when we talked about how to find a job, and that's how I connected through Perri, and she was a guest. It was probably one of our most downloaded shows, I think. It was super helpful, but it was all around the job search and how to find a job.
Yay!
Yay! So the podcast title today is How Collaboration Drives Recruiting, Sourcing, and Hiring. And so the Workology podcast focuses on workplace topics, HR and recruiting, but we're really focused on the employee, like how we're adding value to talent acquisition and talent attraction, and our biggest work expense, or business expense, which isn't the employee and payroll in particularly. So we're talking about collaboration, and when it comes to recruiting and hiring. A recent study from Cornerstone On Demand found that 38% of workers feel that there is not enough collaboration in the workplace. So let's start talking about collaboration. How important, Perri, do you think collaboration is for recruiters and those who are involved in sourcing as well as hiring?
I think that when you look at the landscape of hiring, there is, right now anyway, a lot of, in terms of the way that a company structures their HR/recruitment, my opinion is in many organizations that don't understand the process or how recruitment works, particularly on the hiring manager side, there's an enormous amount of pressure on recruiters in that people just expect that they're all of a sudden going to magically turn up these candidates and these hires are going to get made very quickly. And the truth is that hiring is an organizational effort. It needs to be something that is woven through the culture of a company. And there needs to be a lot of communication and collaboration in order to make it a more efficient process. So that's kind of like on a high level from my perspective. Like for instance, here, let me give you an example. Like if you have a sourcer that's sitting off in a room somewhere by themselves, and they are looking at tons of profiles that, they're looking at a job rec and someone says, okay, well, I'm looking for these things. But the person who wrote that job rec actually has no idea what exists in the market. They're just basically, it's like, oh, I'm looking for my unicorn over here, and so someone else is sitting in another room looking for that unicorn, and they're not actually sharing any information about that. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I've often found that when you open a requisition and you're starting to look for candidates, whether you're sourcing or as a recruiter pre-screening candidates to present, you present the first round and you learn through experience, like maybe the right questions to ask, but you find out when you present the 3 candidates that fit that hiring manager's, perfect candidates, that it's really not what they wanted. They really meant something else.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like dating, right? Look at, I mean, if you ask someone what they were looking for and then who they end up marrying, like, it's usually pretty different. But it's similar, right?
So when I think of sourcing, I think of the process of searching and finding qualified candidates to fill openings. And like you said, it's typically a solitary role. How can we make it more of a team sport?
I think that, well, first of all, in building Archively, this is one of the things that I considered, and Archively basically being a destination for your people research, and the place where, as you're going and looking online in all these different places, that you can put all these candidates into Archively and then be able to group them and workflow them in that early kind of strategic stage of recruiting. We just built a team version, which now allows for the sourcers, the recruiters, like the talent, acquisition managers, so like the people that are not actually hands-on recruiting but are managing recruiting, and the hiring managers can all be in one space and looking at things together, to kind of create more transparency. I think having everyone be on the same page and see each other's feedback is really, really, really important for everyone to kind of get a sense of what is going to work. This is, even, by the way, what I'm talking about is almost before you ever even email someone or pick up the phone. Like, I think that it needs to be extremely strategic in terms of this kind of proactive part of recruiting. Now, this is not about job boards. This is not about like incoming resumes. This is about proactive recruiting,
Which I believe that we as recruiters and talent acquisition leaders should be doing more of.
I think it's definitely has to be part of an organizational strategy. I'm not saying that I think employment branding is really important, right? Because if you want to attract people to your company, you need to know who you are and why people would want to work with you. And today, you need to have good outreach in terms of being accessible to people approaching you as a company. But I don't actually think that putting job recs on the internet and hoping that the right talent is going to apply for your job is a strategy. I know everybody uses it, and I think that it's actually really, really broken, because there is an entire band of talent out there that is not opting into anything. They're not opting in. They're not responding to you on LinkedIn. They're not applying for jobs. They're not opting into these like two-sided services. And to have a real talent strategy, you have to be thinking and considering about that band of talent.
So in the Cornerstone study, which I mentioned earlier, and by the way, if you're looking for information about this podcast on bloggingforjobs.com, just go over to the sidebar and type in Perri Blake Gorman. It's Perri Blake, Blake, Gorman, Gorman, and it will take you directly to the podcast. And I will include any resources or studies that I cite, like this one from Cornerstone, in the body of information when we share the podcast. But back to the Cornerstone study, it said that 33% of workers cite that sharing information within a team framework was extremely important. And I think it's probably even more so in recruiting and hiring, because we are dealing with so many different people and we're serving so many different hiring managers. So tell us more about the different collaboration options and why that's so important, and I guess in what Archively offers.
So here is a theory that I have, which goes back to a lot of my experience as a recruiter. Right, I've been a recruiter for 15 years. And we actually have we do pipelining for companies as well. And the reason that we're so good at it is because I have seen so many profiles and I have interviewed so many people that I have the ability to to see things quickly, right? I can see patterns. I have my own internal database. And what I would love for companies to have is that in their culture, right? It's not about a machine doing it for you. It's not about a search engine doing it for you. It's about your company, like the sourcers, the recruiters, the hiring managers, looking at so many profiles and interviewing so many people that they are so clear and on the same page, that they understand like what works and what doesn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you are one of the few recruiters in the space that's actually developing or has launched a product specifically for the HR or recruiting technology community.
I am. Yeah, I think for me, look, there are lots of interesting takes on this problem, right? It's a very large problem. It's a complex problem. It's different for every company. It's different for every industry. But I think that when I set out to build Archively, I felt that for me in my career, the foundation of good recruitment begins at research. And if you don't have that component set in your organization, you are already on the back foot. You are already in a reactive recruitment environment, and you are going to be behind the eight ball on your hires all the time.
Everybody kind of runs in this like adrenaline emergency mode.
Yep.
When suddenly you have to hire 55 people for this new location that's opening 50 miles away, and that's not healthy.
What's weird is when I talk to people about hiring, they're like, well, we're not ready to hire yet. And I'm like, well, that's exactly when you should start looking. Like, everybody waits until they've got the actual go ahead to start looking at talent. And really, in my opinion, you should actually be pipelining 6 months ahead. If you know you're opening an office in Milwaukee, you should be scouting 6 months in advance for talent.
A little known fact about Blogging for Jobs is that originally I created Blogging for Jobs in 2007 when we just hit our 7-year anniversary for bloggingforjobs.com. But I was an HR director at Office Max. And so our headcounts for the inside sales and outside sales divisions that I was responsible for staffing would change by month. And sometimes we would have 150 new positions. And the expectation from my VP or my president was that we would be filling those positions, within 14 days.
Sorry. I just kind of have to laugh. Like, I think that's hilarious.
There aren't enough hours in the day if I was hiring for 150 people and I knew that it took me 5 interviews before I made a hire, it's physically, like, it's not humanly possible.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about, I think the market's really splitting right now in terms of the tools that are available in terms of unskilled workers and skilled workers, right? So the unskilled market is really going towards this mass interviewing, video interviewing. How many people can we just like funnel through this process? Because we have so many positions open, and it's not necessarily that we need people with particular skills. Like, there's that part of the market. But I'll tell you, the skilled workers are becoming so much more difficult to hire that if you don't have a really fine-tuned strategy, you're not getting them. Like, you have to do the work and the research and the strategy inside of your organization in order to get to and hire these people.
So let me get back to the Office Max story.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. So the expectation was Jessica and her team hire 150 people, and we need 14 days. You have 14 days to do it to be able to start the onboarding process and get them through. And it's just not realistic, because I would have to, if it was 5 people, I'm looking at 750 candidates minimum, and that's to have immediately. So Blogging for Jobs started as a candidate resource so I could start building that pipeline. And the thought was, is if I was providing resources and information and sharing with them. And back in 2007, there was not a lot of blogs out there for job seekers, other than your standard job boards, is that I was providing them real insights from a recruiter, and I could start to build my pipeline, which at the time I was using, and I know that you're going to cringe when I say this, but I was using a spreadsheet to manage the candidates that I was building those relationships with.
Wow. No, it's great. I love to hear that. I love to hear that people are using terrible technology because it makes my life easier to sell my product.
Spreadsheets are just something that recruiters are relying on. While we're talking here, I'll have to go back to a post that I wrote recently on Blogging for Jobs, and I said that spreadsheets are like the bad toxic boyfriend of the recruiting and HR industry. Like, we keep going back.
That's awesome. The bad toxic boyfriend.
Yeah, but it's true. I mean, you don't have a budget, let's say, and so my boss says, Jessica, I need 150 people in 14 days. But we don't have any money to invest in this, and that's ridiculous, because if you were any other division of the company, sales or marketing or even operations, they would provide you technology because you couldn't be able to do your job. It's like not having a point of sale system or service that does its job when you have a retail store.
But this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, which is like the recruitment mentality of an organization is very important. And a lot of companies now, they think of it as some weird back office thing where, like, I think I even saw someone say on Secret, someone was like, yeah, HR is for like the girls that weren't hot enough to be marketing, which is so ridiculous. But they think it's like this back office thing, which I'm sorry, brings in the most important resource of the company, which is its people. And I think that there has to be an agreement within the organization that it's an important thing and that you have to invest in it and that everyone needs to participate.
So let me get back to the statistic that I was referencing. It's 54% of companies still have a manual staffing process that's spreadsheet based. This is from Aberdeen.
Wait, I love that. I don't have that statistic. 54% of companies?
Yes, are still using spreadsheet based recruiting, like strategy or building. I'll send you the link.
I love that. That's such a great stat for me.
Aberdeen, September 2014 report that they just put out about the employee life cycle and automated workflows. And I find this interesting that in the HR technology space, HR technology is estimated at being an $8.1 billion industry by 2015, and yet 54% of us, and no shame here if you are still using spreadsheets for your automated workflows.
By the way, this is why I also created a free version of Archively, because like LinkedIn is trying to do some things with Recruiter, etc. And I kind of have this belief that best practices and good processes shouldn't be behind a $10,000 paywall. People are using free tools because they don't have the budget. And I don't think that people who can't afford it shouldn't be able to have best practices at their fingertips.
I also think you need to look at your terms of service if you're using free products too. And recruiting managers, talent acquisition leaders, if you're managing a team, you need to know what free products or services they're using, because there are a number of them. If you read the TOS, they are pulling all information contained within an internet browser, and like a Chrome or a Safari or a Firefox. So it's really important. So if you have 40 tabs open on Chrome, all that information is being pulled by certain extensions or tools.
Connectify is doing that, right?
Connectify is doing that, and it's a good tool, but I don't think that the average recruiter who's signing up for the free search tool
knows what they're doing.
No. So you're getting, a competitor is getting access potentially to all your information searched within the database.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I think that, I mean, look, I don't know them personally. I've talked to them a couple of times. I mean, I think they're trying to use the crowdsourced method of building a database. I don't know that well, I do know this. I know that if you end up searching the database of that has been built by a crowdsource, that those candidates are going to end up getting more contacts than other potential people, and therefore may not be as responsive. But all in all, their tool is actually very useful.
They're going after other markets other than just recruiting and hiring. They're looking at the sales lead generation market. So, and they're still refining what they're doing. But point being, look at the terms of service, talk to your recruiters to find out what free tools that they are using. It certainly, there aren't that many tools out there in the HR and recruiting technology marketplace that are being built by actual recruiters.
No, there are not.
No, there are not. But it's true. It's true. So let's talk a little bit about social media because we talked about sourcing and how important that is. But there's a lot of different social profiles out there. I mean, the average person is on 2 or 3 different social networks: Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, I don't know, whatever's new that's coming out tomorrow. I saw something earlier this week, some sort of paid social network for people who have lots of money.
Oh yeah, I saw that too. You know what? I can't even imagine that I I don't know. Like I saw that and I'm like, who is building this? Like who is this person that's building
Somebody
this?
that wants to meet people who have money to spend, I guess. But so how do sourcers or recruiting teams or talent acquisition leaders sort through all these profiles and online communities? It's really overwhelming.
Well, here's the thing. Like I think that there's first of all, there's way more data than there used to be, right? When I started recruiting, we did a lot of work just to find out a name of a person. Now, you just have everyone online. I mean, not everyone, but like really almost just an enormous amount of people with their professional and personal information online. It can actually give you the idea that there's like an endless candidate pool, and there isn't. And so when you're thinking about sourcing and recruiting, you actually need to start out with a market strategy. You need to think about, how am I going to research this? You can't just go on some wild browsing goose chase because you'll be totally overwhelmed. You just end up off in a tangent and you don't know how you got there, which is, one of the reasons why I built Archively having a bookmarklet, because you get into a flow when you're doing research. Like there's an actual thing that happens when you're looking at one person and then how you find the next person. It's something that you actually don't want to interrupt. Archively lets you kind of capture that workflow, because you need to be able to figure out, like, how did I actually get there? How do I get back there? And what have I done? What does the market look like? Every search has you need to give every search a kind of a container, if that makes sense, and say, okay, well, these are the kinds of companies, this is the kind of role, and you need to kind of chip away at it so that you walk away with an amount of information that you can then work through and say, okay, you know what, I went through all of the people at those companies and none of them is right for this position. Or I found one that is right. Maybe there are people like that at very similar companies. You have to have some kind of structure or you will just be lost in the woods.
I call it the black hole soul sucking or just hole that you fall into, that is social media, because it can take away hours of your day.
Totally.
And you don't even realize it until you're like, oh man, it is 3 o'clock. I've been sitting here for 3 hours, looking at Twitter hashtags.
By the way, you also, like, this is the other thing. There's a huge like kind of like culture in the sourcing community, which is, finding people at the far edges of the internet with like these particular skills. You actually don't need to be that kind of sourcer to do a good job. Um, if you approach hiring and proactive recruitment with thought and strategy and some structure, and you are careful about how you reach out to candidates, there are plenty of candidates that are appropriate for your job. And if there aren't, then you need to work with your hiring manager to talk about what actually is in the market now that you've done all of that research, and then refit the position. I mean, I just did this with one of our sourcing clients. I personally did a whole research on a particular thing that they were looking for, and I came back to them and I said, you know what? I think you guys need to rethink this. It happens.
But I think that's a good business partner, right? If you're looking at like the bigger picture for the organization, it's not just about filling racks. It's about having honest conversations with your hiring managers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And but in order to do that, you have to have a baseline of knowledge that's very clear about what's there. And if you don't structure your research that way, you have no idea what's in the market. And this is an executive search practice, which, by the way, is something that, like, when I talk to executive search people, they know this. Okay, when you walk into a client to pitch for business in executive search, you actually know the market already. You walk in with org charts, you have companies broken down. You pitch for that business because you know the market. There's no reason why, if you're an internal source or recruiter and you have a company which is your only client that you're hiring for, there is absolutely no excuse for not knowing the market. It's your job.
Well, let's go ahead and take a bit of a reset. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and we are coming to you from the Workology podcast, powered by Blogging for Jobs. The topic today is how collaboration drives recruiting, sourcing, and hiring. And I have the very talented founder and CEO of Archivally. Her name is Perri Gorman. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about collaboration and recruiting, but focus on technical sourcing and recruiting. Your startup is in the heart of Silicon Valley in San Francisco. How important are relationships and research when you're locating these really competitive positions of like a data scientist, developer, or engineer?
So I had a conversation. This comes down to how big is your candidate pool. I had a conversation with some friends of mine who were building a company on a very specific database technology, and they were looking for people with like 5+ years of experience within that candidate pool. And I said to them, because they had hired a recruiter who went out and sort of spammed the market, and I said, you guys really need to be very, very careful, because you don't have a very large candidate pool. You have a very specific amount of people that could potentially do this job, and you need to be much more strategic. And you should probably be working very closely on outreach with, like, you can't just rely on someone to do this for you. You actually need to participate.
I think you and I were at a lunch or something in Palo Alto, and there was a startup founder that we were meeting with, and he said that he was working with a recruitment agency that specialized in technical hiring, and he had given over his LinkedIn credentials, user ID, and password so they could start sending emails. I think that's the worst strategy possible. What do you think?
I think InMail is, look, LinkedIn is really important. Okay, I don't want to say LinkedIn isn't important. They're clearly central to this market. InMail, on the other hand, is something that I avoid at all costs. I actually, the only time I email someone is if I know them and I'm just happen to be in their profile and I need to message them. I never, ever, ever send a cold email on LinkedIn, ever. I mean, what people do. I know that it's a huge piece of people's practice, but people's email addresses are actually pretty readily available. And I think that by emailing them, you have just grouped yourself with all the people that don't know how to write an email. And I think it's a terrible strategy.
I also think that if you hand over your LinkedIn credentials to a technical recruiter, outside agency, you are putting the hands of your brand in somebody who is supposed to be representing you as the CEO or the founder of a company. And I don't necessarily know if that would, I wouldn't want anybody to do it for me.
Well, here's the deal. A bad email is a bad email, and it really doesn't matter who it comes from. I am a huge proponent in technical managers actually reaching out to technical talent directly, but not with like canned pitch emails that recruiters send. It's actually just as bad. It doesn't really matter. And I've seen it, right? Like, I have seen incredible technical CTOs write terrible emails and have the same result that recruiters do. Nobody wants to get those emails. You actually need to do some work and strategy and write something meaningful. So it doesn't really matter who writes it. Like, you know what I mean? It's like giving over your LinkedIn profile and having someone send someone, it's terrible. It's just terrible all around.
So how can your product, Archivally, be used to locate and engage the best talent?
So Archivally doesn't do it for you. Let me just be really clear. And I thought really long and hard about this because, I have a lot of competitors who are building all of these fancy algorithmic things and predictive things and large search engines, et cetera. And people want to take the easy route and have it all done for them. But I made a decision that what makes you good. And what makes an organization good is how you are approaching the research process and the actual process itself. So what Archively does is it allows you to do that process by and then allows you to capture it and make the workflow meaningful, like meaning that if you're going to bother to do the work, let's make it easy for you to capture it. Let's make it easy for you to organize it, keep it. This is one of the things that I also talk to people about, is that let's say you have a recruiter who is working there for 6 months and they leave, and they had looked at tons of profiles about people. They'd worked on 3 different projects, and you say to someone, so do you know what they did? And if that person leaves the company, let me tell you something, they don't. That data is gone. That work is gone. It's people do not know the history of what someone did within a company. And Archively is meant to capture that so that the company can actually have like an asset of work product from the research process.
And I think that is extremely important. There have been a number of case law that's out there right now around recruiters and who owns their contacts within LinkedIn. I mean, that's one of the reasons that like LinkedIn Recruiter was established. But how do you centrally organize your research as a recruiter or somebody in that talent acquisition process and be able to share it with your teammates?
Well, and across the organization, right? This goes back to the other piece of collaboration. If you look at most ATS and other HR compliance products, right? ATS is not a recruitment product. It is a compliance product. It is there to protect your company from getting sued. That is what it's for. And so when you think about that product is not spanning the organization. You have no idea that hiring manager in whatever department, you know what, he's got a spreadsheet too. And that is not being shared with HR or recruitment. There's a lot of information that is not being shared cross-organizationally with regard to people, talent, hires, et cetera. And part of my mission is to try and cut down that friction and allow for a very easy, transparent system that also has kind of some security in place, in the sense that if I share something with a particular team and we have 7 people that are collaborating around a particular project, they don't have access to the whole system. They just have access to that. So it's like pods.
I like that. And I think that by giving them access to a project or a collection of candidates or prospects that you're evaluating, it allows for feedback and improving the search. And you're saying that 6 months before, I mean, ideally in a perfect world, they should be researching and building their list of candidates, that it's going to allow for better hires 6 months later.
Well, think about it, right? If the best hires are actually referrals, right? If we think about, where do the best hires come from? The best hires come from people that the organization already has relationships with. So you can think about, okay, well, if I want to have great talent in my company, how do we as a company start to create great relationships with great talent beforehand? And have that. And so I think that you can only do that if you have a strategic process. It's not random. You have to actually decide, we are going to make a strategic effort as an organization to identify, approach, and have a relationship with great talent. And that starts to begin to convert over time in a way that is extremely valuable.
I also want to mention that Aberdeen, who I absolutely love for analyst reports and information, and they have a 2013 sourcing report, which I'll have the link available on Blogging for Jobs under this podcast directly. But they have shown that the best in class talent acquisition teams and these companies, 53% of them are using some sort of online search strategy to find talent. We're just hoping that that research and strategy that they're implementing is, further out in the process and not some of this sort of like adrenaline filled candidate search and sourcing activity with the expectation that's completely ridiculous.
I just hate, I talk to a lot of recruiters, okay? And what I hate to see are these people who are really trying to do a good job, and they are under enormous pressure because you can't hire fast enough these days. And they the a lot of the organizations that they work with, these hiring managers just have this expectation that these people are just going to create miracles, and unfortunately that's just not how it works. And most recruiters, they've worked on lots and lots of roles, they've hired tons of people, and your average hiring manager, if you kind of look at this, I mean, there are some obviously that have hired a lot, but there are lots of hiring managers out there who have recs to hire that they haven't hired that many people, or they hired their friends. They actually don't even know what goes into a recruitment process. And I think educating an entire organization has got to be on the plate of the future of recruitment as well, because it's it has to be a thing in the culture of a company in order to do it well.
Absolutely agreed. So let me ask you before we kind of head on down the home stretch here, do you have any bold predictions for where you think sourcing and recruiting technology is heading?
Well, what's funny is I've been using this analogy for a little while now. I made a decision personally to go old school, and not over automate my product. And I sort of joke with people and say that I'm the organic farmer in the time of the microwave. And there's this whole environment of data is very sexy, and algorithms are very sexy, and investors love to invest in these kinds of things. And I sort of believe that when you look at the process and people and all of this, I think that we're going to have a reset uh, to some old school 101 practices. I think that there is a place for data in the market, but data is only as valuable as the people who are using it. Like, so meaning, data is really worthless if you don't know what to do with it. And so there has to be sort of a little bit of an old school reset, I think. And then you can layer on sort of the new on top of that. But without the foundation, it doesn't work.
So we're going to go old school.
I think that there's a lot of people who are pushing old school right now.
Well, thanks for taking the time to talk on the Workology podcast today, Perri. First, where can people go to find more about you or connect with you after this is all over here, this podcast?
Well, they can Google me. And they can make an archively profile about me. No, I'm just kidding. They can the best place to get me is always Twitter, because I will respond to anybody on Twitter. I don't respond to LinkedIn connections with people I don't know. You are free to email me, though I don't email a lot. But Twitter I always respond to at Be the Butterfly, BETHE Butterfly.
And she's very quick to respond, guys. So that's a great place to connect with Perri there.
Yeah, and if people want to demo our team version, which is demo only right now, the free version is opening October 1st to the public. It's coming out of invite only. There will be a pro version as well, which has unlimited attachments and things that like an individual practitioner can use. And then the team version, we are starting to sell by demoing for teams with a 30-day trial, and people can sign up for that and contact me, and I am more than happy to help them get set up on it.
How to reach Archively is ARCHIVE.LY.
Actually, no, really exciting. We just moved to the .com yesterday. So archively.com now. It's legit, officially.
You were legit before, but check out archively.com and see what they're up to and connect with Perri. Thank you, everyone, for joining the Workology podcast today, hosted by me, Jessica Miller-Merrill, where we discuss the science and art of the workplace, HR, and recruitment. Until next time, you can get more information about sourcing, hiring, everything to do with the workplace and talent acquisition and HR at bloggingforjobs.com. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jess.
Production services for the Workology podcast provided by Total Picture Media.